The bullet that killed Georgia's husband came through their cabin window on a Thursday evening in October, and she had been the one holding the lantern that made him an easy target. Johnson City, Texas, 1878. The small settlement nestled along the Pedernales River had seen its share of violence, but nothing prepared Georgia Martinez for the sight of Samuel crumpling to the floor, blood spreading across the pine boards she had scrubbed clean that very morning. The bandits took everything, their savings, the horses, even the silver locket Samuel had given her on their wedding day. But worse than the theft was the guilt that settled into her bones like winter frost. She had been careless, standing too close to the window with that bright flame, and Samuel had paid the price. The months that followed blurred together in shades of gray. At 24 years old, Georgia found herself a widow running a failing ranch with debts she could not pay. The townsfolk offered sympathy in measured doses, but sympathy did not rebuild fences or birth calves, or keep the bank from threatening foreclosure. She learned to do the work herself, rising before dawn to tend the livestock, her hands blistering and then callousing, her back aching in ways she had never imagined. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emptiness that greeted her each night when she returned to that cabin, to those scrubbed floorboards where Samuel's blood had soaked through. She stopped going to town unless absolutely necessary. The pitying glances felt like accusations, and perhaps they should have been. If she had just moved away from that window, if she had blown out the lantern, if. The words became a rhythm in her mind, keeping time with the thud of the axe when she split wood, the slosh of water when she carried buckets from the creek. She spoke to no one except out of necessity, and even then, she kept her words brief and her eyes downcast. Trust had been a luxury she could no longer afford. Spring arrived with wildflowers dotting the Texas hillsides, bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush creating carpets of color that Georgia barely noticed. She was mending the fence along the eastern pasture when she heard the sound of hooves approaching. Her heart seized, and she dropped the hammer, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she now kept within arm's reach at all times. The rider who appeared over the rise sat easy in his saddle, leading a pack horse behind him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. Even from a distance, she could see he was young, probably not much older than her own 24 years. "Madam," he called out, stopping a respectful distance away and raising one hand in greeting. "Name's Graham Frost. I'm looking for work. Heard in town you might need help with your ranch." Georgia's jaw tightened. She had not asked anyone in town for help. In fact, she had explicitly told the banker that she would manage on her own. "I cannot afford to hire anyone," she said, her voice flat. "You heard wrong." Graham Frost dismounted, and she noticed he moved with a grace unusual for someone his size. He had to be over 6 feet, with the kind of build that came from years of hard labor. His face was tanned, with a strong jaw and eyes that were startlingly blue even in the harsh afternoon sun. "Begging your pardon, madam, but I was not asking for wages. I need a place to stay for a spell, and I am willing to work for my keep. Just meals and a corner of the barn would suit me fine." "Why?" The word came out sharp, suspicious. "Why would you work for nothing?" He looked at her directly, and there was something in his gaze that made her want to turn away. Not aggression, but a kind of gentle steadiness that felt foreign after months of isolation. Because sometimes people need help, and sometimes people need to give it. Right now, we both seem to need something. "I do not need anything," Georgia said, but even as the words left her mouth, a gust of wind knocked over the fence post she had been trying to set, sending it clattering against the rocky ground. Graham said nothing, just stood there waiting. She felt heat rise to her cheeks, hating the vulnerability of the moment, hating that this stranger had witnessed yet another failure. "I will give you a week," she finally said. "You work hard, you get meals and the barn. After that, you move on, and I do not want conversation. You do your work, I do mine. Understood? Understood, madam." He tipped his hat, and she caught a glimpse of a smile before she turned away, her heart pounding harder than it should have been. She did not trust the relief she felt at having another person on the property. She could not afford to trust anything anymore. Graham proved to be a man of his word. That first evening, he settled his horses in the barn without asking for anything beyond the direction to the water trough. Georgia left a plate of beans and cornbread on the porch, and when she looked out later, the plate was clean and neatly stacked by the door. The next morning, she woke to find the eastern fence completely repaired, the posts set straight and true in a way she had not managed in weeks of trying. Graham was already working on the northern pasture by the time she made her way outside, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat darkening the fabric across his shoulders despite the cool morning air. She watched him for a moment from the porch, coffee cup warming her hands. There was something methodical about the way he worked, a patience in how he tested each post before moving to the next. Samuel had always rushed through chores, eager to get to whatever he deemed more important. This man seemed to find importance in the work itself. The thought felt like a betrayal, and she turned away sharply, spilling hot coffee across her fingers. The days developed a rhythm. Georgia worked the vegetable garden and tended the chickens while Graham handled the heavier labor, repairing the barn roof, clearing the irrigation ditches, fixing the broken wheel on the wagon. They rarely spoke beyond the essential. She would leave his meals on the porch, and he would eat them without complaint, never asking for more or different. Sometimes she would catch him watching her when she carried water or hung laundry, but the moment she met his eyes, he would look away and return to his work. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Georgia told herself she would send him away after the barn roof was finished, then after the wagon was fixed, then after he helped birth the calf from her struggling heifer. Each time, she found a new reason to let him stay one more day. She hated herself for the weakness, but could not deny that the ranch was beginning to look like it had before Samuel died. More than that, even. Graham had an eye for what needed doing and the skill to do it right. It was nearly a month before the careful silence between them broke. Georgia was in the barn, struggling to lift a heavy bag of feed. She had managed to get it halfway onto the shelf when her grip slipped, and the bag came crashing down. She stumbled backward, would have fallen hard if strong hands had not caught her shoulders, steadying her. "Easy there," Graham said, his voice close to her ear. "Let me help." "I can do it myself," Georgia snapped, pulling away from his touch as if burned. Her heart raced, and she hated the fear that surged through her. He was just trying to help. But his hands on her shoulders, the solid warmth of another person so close, it brought back memories she had tried to bury. Samuel holding her, Samuel falling. Blood on her hands. Graham stepped back immediately, raising his palms. "I know you can, madam. I have seen you do plenty on your own. But there is no shame in accepting help now and then." "You do not understand," she said, and to her horror her voice cracked. She turned away quickly, blinking back the moisture in her eyes. "You cannot." "Maybe not," he agreed quietly, "but I would listen if you wanted to talk about it." "I do not want to talk." She forced steel into her tone. "And I did not ask you to stay this long. Maybe it is time you moved on." There was a long pause. Then Graham said, "If that is what you truly want, I will pack up and be gone by morning." "But Georgia," he paused, and she realized it was the first time he had used her name. "I think you are carrying something heavy, and you have been carrying it alone for too long. I am not asking you to trust me. I am just asking you to let me help with the work while you figure things out." She should have told him to leave, should have insisted, but the exhaustion that had been building for months suddenly felt overwhelming. "One more week," she whispered. "Then you go." "One more week," he agreed. The next morning, Georgia woke to the sound of rain drumming on the roof. Spring storms in Texas could be fierce, and this one had arrived with little warning. She dressed quickly and ran to the barn, splashing through puddles, worried about the horses. But when she threw open the barn door, she found Graham had already moved them to the high stalls, away from where water was seeping through cracks in the foundation. He was working to dig a small trench to divert the flow, his clothes soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. "You should be inside," he said when he saw her. "No sense in both of us getting drenched." Instead of answering, Georgia grabbed a shovel and began digging alongside him. They worked in silence, the rain a constant roar above them. After an hour, they had managed to redirect most of the water, saving the stored hay from ruin. Georgia straightened, wiping mud from her face, and found Graham looking at her with something like approval. "You are tougher than you look," he said. "I have had to be." She meant it to sound hard, but somehow it came out simply honest. They walked back to the house together, both shivering in their wet clothes. At the porch, Georgia hesitated, then made a decision that surprised her. "Come inside. You will catch your death if you stay in those wet things." "I will make coffee." Graham looked startled but nodded. "I will take off my boots out here." Inside, Georgia stoked the fire while Graham stood awkwardly by the door, dripping onto the floor she had scrubbed so many times. She handed him a blanket from the trunk by the hearth. "There is a screen there if you want to hang your shirt to dry. I will not look." While he changed, she busied herself with the coffee, her hands trembling slightly. Having another person in this space felt wrong and right all at once. She had not had anyone inside the cabin since Samuel died. The silence had been her shield, her punishment, her prison. But now, with Graham rustling behind the screen, the fire crackling, the smell of coffee filling the air, the cabin felt almost alive again. When he emerged, bare-chested with the blanket draped over his shoulders, she kept her eyes carefully on the coffee pot. But she had noticed, in that brief glance, the scars across his back. Old scars, long-healed but significant. Everyone carried their wounds, she supposed. They sat at opposite ends of the small table, hands wrapped around tin cups, the rain continuing its assault on the roof. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Graham said, "I heard in town what happened to your husband. I am sorry for your loss." George's fingers tightened on the cup. "What else did you hear in town? That you blame yourself. That you have been out here alone, working yourself to the bone, not accepting help from anyone. They talk too much in town. They care about you. They pity me. That is different." She stared into the black coffee. "And they are right to. It was my fault. I was holding the lantern by the window. I made him a target." "You did not pull the trigger," Graham said quietly. "I might as well have." "No." His voice was firm now. "The men who came to your home, who shot your husband, they are the ones responsible. Not you. You cannot carry that guilt forever, Georgia. It will destroy you." She looked up at him then, really looked at him. His blue eyes were intense, almost fierce. "Why do you care? You do not know me." "I know what it is like to carry guilt," he said. "To think that if you had just done something differently, everything would be fine. But that is not how life works. Sometimes terrible things happen, and they are not our fault, and we still have to find a way to keep living. Is that why you have those scars on your back?" He flinched slightly, then gave a rueful smile. "You noticed?" "Yes, I grew up with a father who had a heavy hand and a drinking problem. I spent years thinking I deserved every lash because I was not good enough, not fast enough, not quiet enough." Took me a long time to understand that his choices were not my fault, that I did not deserve to be hurt just because I existed. Georgia felt something crack in her chest. How did you learn that? I left. Rode away one night when I was 17 and never went back. I met people along the way who showed me kindness without expecting anything in return. It taught me that the world was bigger than the pain I had been living in, that I could choose something different. He paused. I see that same pain in you, Georgia. That same determination to suffer because you think you deserve it, but you do not. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She had not cried since the day they buried Samuel, had not allowed herself that release. But now, sitting across from this stranger who somehow saw straight through her defenses, the dam broke. She sobbed, harsh and ugly, her whole body shaking. And Graham did not try to touch her or comfort her with empty words. He just sat there, present and steady, until the storm inside her began to match the one outside, fierce but ultimately finite. When she finally quieted, he got up and refilled her coffee cup, then returned to his seat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not telling me it will be all right, for not trying to fix it." "Some things cannot be fixed," he agreed. "They can only be survived. And you are surviving, Georgia. You are doing better than you think." The rain continued through the afternoon and into the evening. They talked more than they had in all the previous weeks combined. Graham told her about his travels, the ranches he had worked, the people he had met. He had a gift for storytelling, painting pictures with his words that made her almost forget where she was. She found herself laughing at his description of a particularly stubborn bull in Oklahoma, then felt guilty for the laughter, then realized that Samuel would not have wanted her to stop laughing forever. As night fell and the rain finally eased to a drizzle, Graham stood to leave. "I should get back to the barn." "Wait," Georgia said. She took a breath. "You can stay. In the house, I mean. There is a small room off the kitchen that Samuel used for storage. It has a cot. It would be more comfortable than the barn." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him weighing the offer, understanding what it meant for her to make it. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted, "but I am offering anyway." "Then I accept, thank you." That night, lying in her own bed with another person sleeping just one room away, Georgia felt the smallest loosening of the knot that had been strangling her heart. She was not healed. She was not whole. But for the first time since Samuel died, she felt like maybe, eventually, she could be. The work continued, but the nature of it changed. Graham still rose early and handled the heavy labor, but now Georgia worked alongside him more often. He taught her how to properly shoe a horse, his hands guiding hers as she held the hammer, his patience infinite when she bent a nail or struck wrong. She showed him where the best fishing spots were along the Pedernales, and they spent an evening catching enough catfish to last them several days. They cooked together, an awkward dance at first in the small kitchen, but gradually they learned each other's rhythms. One afternoon, while they were repairing the chicken coop, a snake slithered out from under the boards. Georgia yelped and jumped back, colliding with Graham's chest. His arms came around her instinctively, and for a moment they stood frozen, her back pressed against him, his breath warm on her neck. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to pull away, but she did not. Could not. The snake disappeared into the grass, and slowly, carefully, Graham released her. "Sorry," he murmured. "It is fine," she said, but her voice was shaky. "Thank you, I do not like snakes, I noticed." There was gentle humor in his tone, and when she glanced at him, she saw he was trying not to smile. "You can laugh," she said. "It was ridiculous." "It was human," he countered. "Nothing ridiculous about being startled." They returned to work, but Georgia could still feel the phantom warmth of his arms around her. It had felt safe, being held like that, and that terrified her almost as much as the snake had. May arrived with blazing heat, the Texas sun turning the landscape golden and harsh. Graham had been with Georgia for nearly 2 months now, and neither of them had mentioned him leaving again. The ranch was thriving in ways it had not even when Samuel was alive. The fences were solid, the animals healthy, the garden producing more vegetables than she could use. Graham had even negotiated a deal with a cattle buyer in Austin, getting a fair price for the steers that would keep the bank satisfied and leave money for supplies. But more than the physical improvements, Georgia felt herself changing. She smiled more often. She slept better. She started riding into town on Saturday afternoons, accepting invitations to have coffee with the other women, slowly rebuilding connections she had severed in her grief. And through it all, Graham was there, a constant presence that somehow managed to be both reassuring and challenging. He pushed her, gently but persistently, to try things she had been afraid to attempt. When she said she could not break the new mare they had bought, he encouraged her until she did it, discovering a talent she did not know she possessed. When she hesitated to haggle with the supply merchant who was known for cheating widows, Graham stood behind her silently while she found her voice and her strength, negotiating a fair deal on her own. He never did things for her when she was capable of doing them herself. Instead, he created space for her to discover her own competence. "Why do you do that?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "Push me, I mean. It would be easier to just do things yourself." "Easier is not always better," Graham said. "You are strong, Georgia. Stronger than you believe. I just want you to see what I see." "And what do you see?" He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "I see a woman who survived something terrible and decided to keep fighting. I see someone who is brave enough to let go of guilt even though it means facing all the pain underneath. I see someone I admire more than just about anyone I have ever met." Graham. She did not know how to finish the sentence, did not know what she wanted to say. "I know," he said quietly. "It is too soon. Maybe it will always be too soon. But I wanted you to know how I see you, not as broken, not as something to be pitied, as someone extraordinary." Her heart hammered in her chest. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat back into the safety of solitude. But a larger part, the part that had been slowly healing over these months, wanted to stay right here on this porch with this man who had given her so much without asking for anything in return. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I know," he said again. "And I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to. We can take this as slow as you need." "What is this?" "I do not know yet, but I would like to find out if you are willing." Georgia thought about Samuel, about the love they had shared. It had been real and good, but it was gone. He was gone. And she was still here, still breathing, still living. Did she deserve to be happy again? Graham would say yes, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe him. "I might be willing," she said carefully, "but I need time and patience. I have plenty of both." He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle. "Is this all right?" She looked down at their joined hands, felt the tears threatening again. But these were different tears. Not grief, but something newer. Something that felt almost like hope. "Yes," she said. "This is all right." They sat like that until the stars came out, hand in hand, not speaking, just existing together in a moment that felt both fragile and strong. When they finally went inside for the night, Graham squeezed her hand once before releasing it, and Georgia felt the loss of his touch like a physical thing. But it was a good ache, a living ache, the kind that reminded her she was still capable of feeling something other than pain. June brought the summer cattle drive, and Graham asked if she wanted to help move their small herd to the better grazing land to the north. Georgia had never done a cattle drive before. Samuel had always hired men for that work, but she agreed, curious to test herself in yet another way. They left before dawn, the air still cool, the world painted in shades of gray and blue. Graham rode ahead while Georgia brought up the rear, keeping the stragglers in line. It was hard work, hot and dusty, but there was something exhilarating about it too. The cattle moved like a living river, and she and Graham worked together with an unspoken coordination that came from their months of shared labor. When they stopped to water the herd at midday, he rode back to check on her. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," she admitted, wiping sweat from her forehead. "This is actually exciting." He grinned, and she realized she loved seeing him smile. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger and more carefree. "You are a natural ranch woman, Georgia Martinez." "I had my doubts at first, but you have proven me wrong about a dozen times over." "You had doubts?" "When I first saw you trying to set that fence post, I thought you might be in over your head," he admitted. "But then I watched you keep trying, keep working, never giving up even when it would have been easier to quit. That is when I knew you were going to be just fine." "I was not fine," she said. "I was drowning. You were surviving. There is a difference." He dismounted and offered her water from his canteen. As she drank, he added, "Besides, you are not alone anymore. You know that, right?" She handed back the canteen, their fingers brushing. "I am starting to." They reached the grazing land by late afternoon, and spent an hour making sure the herd was settled. The ride back was slower, more relaxed. Graham told her about other drives he had been on, painting vivid pictures of stampedes and river crossings and long nights under the stars. She found herself studying his profile as he talked, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands moved when he was describing something, the passion in his voice when he spoke about the land and the animals. When had she stopped seeing him as just hired help? When had he become Graham, the man who made her laugh, who challenged her, who looked at her like she was something precious? She could not pinpoint the exact moment. It had happened gradually, a sunrise rather than a lightning strike, and that made it somehow more real, more trustworthy. As if sensing her gaze, Graham turned to look at her. "What are you thinking about?" "You," she said honestly. "And how much has changed since you arrived?" "Good changes, I hope." "Terrifying changes," she corrected. "But yes, good too." He reined in his horse and she stopped beside him. They were on a rise overlooking the valley, the ranch visible in the distance, the pedernales glinting like a ribbon in the late afternoon sun. "Georgia, I need to tell you something." Her stomach tightened. "What?" "I came to Johnson City looking for work. That part was true. But I had heard about you specifically, the widow trying to run a ranch alone. I wanted to help." "Why?" The question came out sharp. "Why did you care about some stranger?" "Because 3 years ago, when I was at my lowest, someone helped me. A rancher up in Kansas took me in when I was half-starved and nearly frozen. He gave me work, gave me a place to heal. He taught me that there are good people in this world and that we have an obligation to help each other when we can." Graham's eyes were earnest. "When I heard about your situation, I thought maybe I could be that person for you. That is why I offered to work for just room and board. I did not need the money. I needed to give back what was given to me." Georgia absorbed this information, trying to decide how she felt about it. "So this was charity?" "Pity, no," he said firmly. "It started as wanting to help, but it became so much more. You became so much more." He took a breath. "I am falling in love with you, Georgia. I have been for weeks now. And I know it might be too soon, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I needed you to know the truth. All of it." The words hung in the air between them. Georgia's heart raced, her mind spinning. She had suspected his feelings, had felt them in the way he looked at her, the gentleness of his touch, the care he took with her healing. But hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that was both wonderful and terrifying. "I do not know if I can love you back," she said, forcing honesty even though it hurt. "I do not know if I am capable of that anymore." "That is all right," Graham said. "I am not asking you to love me. I am just telling you how I feel, no expectations, no pressure." "Why tell me it all then?" "Because you deserve honesty. Because hiding it felt like a lie. And because even if you never love me back, I want you to know that you are worthy of being loved. Not despite what happened, but including it. All of you, Georgia. The grief, the guilt, the strength, the fear. All of it is worthy of love." Tears streamed down her face, and this time she did not try to hide them. "I want to believe that. Then let me prove it to you. One gentle moment at a time. No rush, no demands, just us figuring this out together." She looked at him. This man who had appeared when she needed him most, who had worked without asking for payment, who had pushed her to be stronger while accepting her exactly as she was, who had somehow seen past her walls to the woman underneath, who was offering her love without requiring her to reciprocate. It was the most generous thing anyone had ever given her. "I am afraid I will hurt you," she whispered. "I am willing to take that risk. I am afraid I will hurt myself, that I will let myself care and then lose you too." "That is what living means," Graham said gently. "Risking loss for the possibility of joy. I cannot promise I will never leave or never die. But I can promise that right now, in this moment, I am choosing you, and I will keep choosing you for as long as you let me." Georgia thought about Samuel, about the guilt she had been carrying. She thought about the lonely months in that cabin, convinced she deserved nothing but suffering. And she thought about these past weeks with Graham, the slow thawing of her frozen heart, the moments of laughter and partnership, and something that felt like maybe the beginnings of happiness. "I cannot promise anything," she said. "I cannot promise I will love you back or that I will not push you away. But I can promise to try, to let you stay, to see where this goes." Graham's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "That is all I am asking for." He dismounted and came to stand beside her horse, looking up at her. Slowly, giving her time to refuse, he raised his hand. She leaned down and his fingers brushed her cheek, gentle and warm. Then she made a decision. She dismounted, and when she was standing in front of him, she took his face in her hands and kissed him. It was soft and careful, a question more than a statement. But Graham answered with equal gentleness, his arms coming around her waist, holding her like she was something precious that might break. She had forgotten what it felt like to be held with tenderness, to be touched with care instead of need. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For taking the risk. For trusting me even a little bit. I know how hard that is for you." "It is getting easier," she admitted. And it was true. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was also warmth and hope and the flutter of something she was almost ready to call joy. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, the horses walking close enough that their legs brushed. The sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, painting the whole world in shades of fire. And for the first time since that terrible October night, Georgia felt like maybe she was allowed to see the beauty again. Maybe she was allowed to be happy. The summer unfolded in a series of gentle moments. Graham teaching her to dance in the kitchen after dinner, humming an old tune while she stood on his feet, both of them laughing when they nearly crashed into the table. Georgia surprising him with his favorite meal after a long day working on the irrigation system. Long evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams and fears. He was patient with her hesitations, never pushing when she pulled back, always giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. When the anniversary of Samuel's death approached and she became quiet and withdrawn, Graham simply stayed close, a silent presence that said she did not have to go through it alone. When she woke crying from nightmares, he would bring her tea and sit with her until dawn, never once making her feel weak for the tears. "You are allowed to grieve and love at the same time," he told her one night after a particularly bad dream. "One does not cancel out the other. Samuel was important to you. He will always be part of your story. I am not trying to replace him or make you forget him. I just want to be part of your story going forward if you will let me." "You already are," she said, realizing it was true. "I think you have been for a while now." "Does that scare you?" "Yes, but it also makes me happy. Both things can be true, right? Both things can absolutely be true." In August, the cattle buyer from Austin returned with a proposal. He wanted to contract with them for regular shipments, enough business to make the ranch truly profitable. It was everything Georgia had been working toward, the security that would ensure she never had to worry about the bank again. But it would mean more work than the two of them could handle alone. "We would need to hire help," Graham said as they reviewed the offer by lamplight. "Maybe 2 or 3 hands, at least during cattle season." "I cannot manage that many people," Georgia said, feeling overwhelmed. "I am barely managing as it is. You are doing more than managing. You are thriving." Graham reached across the table and took her hand. "But you do not have to do this if you do not want to. We are fine as we are. We do not need to expand. But we could do so much more. We could build this into something real, something lasting. Then we will do it together. I will help you manage the hands. We will figure it out as we go, just like we have figured out everything else." She looked at him, at the confidence in his eyes, the steady faith he had in her abilities. When had she started thinking of the ranch as belonging to both of them instead of just her? When had I become we? But it felt right. It felt like partnership, like a future being built together. "All right," she said. "Let us do it. Let us make this ranch into something extraordinary." Graham grinned and pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "That is my girl." The possessive endearment sent a thrill through her. His girl. Was she? Yes, she realized, she was. Not in a way that diminished her independence, but in a way that acknowledged the bond growing between them. She was his and he was hers, and that was not weakness. It was strength multiplied. They hired 3 ranch hands in September, young men eager for steady work. Graham trained them while Georgia managed the books and the household, and together they built a system that worked. The ranch flourished. The cattle deal proved even more profitable than expected. Georgia paid off the remaining debts and had money left over to make improvements. A new barn, better equipment, even a few head of quality breeding stock. But more than the material success, Georgia felt herself coming back to life. She laughed freely now, the sound no longer feeling like betrayal. She made plans for the future without guilt. She let Graham hold her, kiss her, slowly teach her body to feel pleasure again without fear. They did not rush into anything physical beyond kissing and careful touches, both of them understanding that trust was still being built. But each moment of intimacy felt like a gift, a sign that she was healing in ways she had not thought possible. One evening in early October, almost exactly a year after Samuel's death, Georgia found herself standing in the spot where she had been holding the lantern that fateful night. She had avoided this particular place for months, unable to face the memories. But now, with Graham working in the barn and the setting sun painting the sky in familiar colors, she made herself stand there and remember. She remembered Samuel's laugh, his dreams for the ranch, the way he used to kiss her forehead before heading out to work. She remembered the good times before the bad, the love they had shared. And she let herself feel the grief fully, not as punishment but as honor. He had been important, he had mattered, and it was all right to miss him. But she also acknowledged what she had been afraid to admit, that her marriage had not been perfect, that Samuel had sometimes been careless and dismissive, that he had loved her but had not always seen her strength, that what she had with Graham was different, built on mutual respect and partnership in ways her first marriage had not been. It did not mean she loved Samuel less. It meant she was allowing herself to love Graham more fully. "I am sorry," she whispered to the ghost of her husband. "I am sorry I could not save you, but I am not sorry for surviving. I am not sorry for living, and I am not sorry for loving again." She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to find Graham behind her. He did not say anything, just pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. These were different tears than the ones she had shed before. These were tears of release, of forgiveness, of letting go. When she finally quieted, she pulled back and looked up at him. "I love you," she said. The words felt strange on her tongue, but also right, true. "I love you, Graham Frost. I do not know when it happened or how, but I do, and I am not afraid of it anymore." His eyes widened, then crinkled with joy. "You mean that?" "I mean it. You earned my trust, one gentle moment at a time, just like you said you would. You never pushed, never demanded, never made me feel guilty for needing time. You just loved me and let me heal at my own pace. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you too." Graham kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring everything he felt into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he said, "Marry me." George's heart skipped. "What? Marry me?" he repeated. "Not because you have to, not because it makes practical sense, but because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build this ranch together, raise a family if you want that, grow old watching sunsets from that porch. I want all of it, Georgia, with you. Only you." She thought about what her life had been a year ago, broken, isolated, drowning in guilt. And she thought about what it was now, full of purpose, partnership, and love. Graham had not saved her, she had saved herself, but he had given her the space and support to do it. He had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. And now he was offering her a future that felt bright and possible. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Yes, I will marry you." He whooped and picked her up, spinning her around until she was laughing and breathless. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands. "I promise I will spend every day earning your trust. I promise I will never take you for granted. I promise I will love you through the hard times and the easy times, through grief and joy, through everything life throws at us. And I promise to let you," she said, "to let myself be loved, to trust that this is real and good and that I deserve it, that we both deserve it." They married in November, a small ceremony in the Johnson City church with the people who had watched George's journey from grief to healing. The whole town turned out, celebrating not just a wedding but a resurrection. Georgia wore a simple blue dress and carried wildflowers. Graham wore his best shirt and could not stop smiling. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was witnessed by dozens but felt intimate, a promise made and kept. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard, music playing, food shared among friends. Georgia danced with Graham under the stars, and this time she did not need to stand on his feet. She had learned the steps, just as she had learned to trust again, to love again, to believe in the possibility of happiness. "Thank you," she whispered as they swayed to the music. "For what?" "For being patient with me, for not giving up even when I pushed you away, for loving me when I did not think I was worthy of being loved." "You were always worthy," Graham said firmly. You just needed time to see it, and I would have waited as long as it took. I know. That is why I love you." They stayed on the ranch, building it into one of the most successful operations in the county. They hired more hands, expanded their herds, added crops to diversify their income. But more importantly, they built a life together filled with small joys and shared challenges. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they had learned to communicate, to compromise, to always come back to the foundation of trust and respect that undergirded their relationship. In the spring of 1880, Georgia discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Graham was overjoyed, already making plans for a nursery, talking about teaching their child to ride and rope and love the land as much as they did. But Georgia worried. What if something went wrong? What if she lost this baby? What if she was not a good mother? "You will be an amazing mother," Graham assured her one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Look at how you have nurtured this ranch back to life. Look at how you care for the animals, for the hands who work for us, for me. You have so much love in you, Georgia. This baby is lucky to have you. What if I am not enough? You are more than enough. And you are not doing this alone. We are partners, remember? We will raise this child together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and with each passing month, Georgia felt her confidence grow. She prepared the nursery with help from the women in town, listened to their advice and stories, let herself imagine a future with a child in her arms. Graham was attentive without being overbearing, taking over more of the heavy ranch work as her belly grew, but never making her feel incapable. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby with Graham's blue eyes and Georgia's dark hair. They named him Samuel Graham Frost Martinez, honoring both the past and the present. When Georgia held him for the first time, she felt a love so fierce it almost hurt. This tiny person, created from love and hope and healing, represented everything she had fought for. "He is perfect," Graham whispered, his own eyes damp as he looked at his son. "He is ours," Georgia said, and the possessive felt right. Their child, their family, their future. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch. Georgia proved to be a natural mother, firm but loving, teaching her son to be kind and strong in equal measure. In 1882, they had a daughter, Rebecca Grace, who inherited her mother's determination and her father's easy smile. The ranch continued to thrive, and they became pillars of the Johnson City community, known for their fair dealings and generous spirits. But the most important thing, the thing Georgia treasured above all else, was the relationship she had built with Graham. They had started with broken pieces and built something whole. They had taken fear and transformed it into trust. They had proven that love could be gentle and patient, that healing was possible, that second chances were real. On their 10th anniversary, Georgia and Graham rode out to the spot where he had first appeared over the rise, looking for work all those years ago. They sat on their horses, hand in hand, looking back at the ranch they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Georgia asked. "Stopping here instead of riding on?" "Not for a single second," Graham said. "This is where I was meant to be, with you, building this life. It is more than I ever dreamed of having." "I thought I would never trust anyone again," Georgia admitted. "I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, punishing myself for something that was not my fault. And then you came along and changed everything." "You changed everything," Graham corrected. "You did the hard work of healing. You chose to trust again, to love again, to live again. I just provided some support along the way." "You provided everything," she said. "You gave me back myself." They returned to the ranch as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Their children ran out to greet them, Samuel now 10 years old and Rebecca 8, both of them chattering about their day. Graham dismounted and scooped Rebecca up while Samuel helped his mother down from her horse. They walked into the house together. This family built from loss and love, from pain and patience, from fear transformed into trust. That evening, after the children were in bed, Georgia and Graham sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the night was filled with the sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing, horses nickering, the distant call of a night bird. "I am happy," Georgia said softly. "Truly, deeply happy. I did not think I would ever be able to say that again." "You deserve to be happy," Graham said, squeezing her hand. "You deserve all the good things life has to offer. So do you. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for earning my trust one gentle moment at a time." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. "Thank you for taking the risk. Thank you for loving me." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other when they needed it most, who had built a life together brick by brick, moment by moment. The past would always be part of Georgia's story, Samuel's death, her grief, her guilt, but it no longer defined her. She had moved beyond survival into truly living. In 1890, when Samuel Jr. was preparing to take over more responsibilities on the ranch, and Rebecca was studying to become a teacher, Georgia looked back on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the terrified widow she had been, convinced she deserved nothing but suffering. And she looked at the woman she had become, a successful rancher, a loving mother, a beloved wife, a valued member of her community. Graham found her standing in the spot where Samuel had died, something she did occasionally now without pain. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come. About how grateful I am for everything we have built together. Any regrets? Not a single one." She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to touch his face. There were lines around his eyes now, silver threading through his hair, but he was still the man who had appeared on her ranch all those years ago, offering help without expecting anything in return. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Graham Frost." "The feeling is entirely mutual, Mrs. Frost." She laughed at the formal address, then kissed him soundly. After all these years, his touch still made her heart race. His love still felt like the greatest gift she had ever received. And the trust they had built together, one gentle moment at a time, was the foundation on which their entire life rested. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Georgia sent up a silent prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for patient love, for the courage to trust again. For Graham, who had seen past her pain to the woman underneath. For the life they had built together in this wild, beautiful, challenging land. The ranch that had once represented her greatest failure had become her greatest triumph. The cabin that had been a prison of guilt had transformed into a home filled with laughter and love. And the heart she had thought was too broken to ever love again had proven capable of depths of feeling she had never imagined. That night, lying in bed with Graham's arms around her, Georgia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It had not been easy. There had been setbacks and struggles, moments of doubt and fear. But with Graham's patient support, she had learned that trust was not something you gave all at once. It was built slowly, carefully, through consistent actions and gentle moments, through showing up day after day, through keeping promises both large and small, through loving someone not despite their brokenness but including it. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Graham murmured back, his voice heavy with sleep. "Always have, always will." Georgia smiled and let her eyes close, feeling safe and cherished and deeply, completely happy. She had feared trusting again after Samuel's death, had been certain she would never open her heart to another person. But Graham had earned that trust, one gentle moment at a time, proving through his patience and constancy that love could be soft as well as strong, that healing was possible, that broken things could be made whole. As sleep claimed her, her last thought was one of profound gratitude. For the life she had been given, for the love she had found, for the courage she had discovered within herself. She had survived the worst thing she could imagine, and she had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and infinitely more capable of appreciating the precious gift of each new day. The morning would bring new challenges, as all mornings did. There would be work to do, decisions to make, problems to solve. But she would face them all with Graham by her side, their children growing strong and capable, their ranch thriving, their love as solid and enduring as the Texas bedrock beneath them. This was the life she had built from ashes. This was the happiness she had earned through pain and persistence. This was the trust she had learned to give again, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever created. Not perfect, but real. Not without scars, but stronger because of them. A love story written in patience and gentle moments, in second chances and healing hearts, in the wild, beautiful landscape of Texas in the late 1800s. And it was more than enough. It was everything.